24. Most watched, most trusted. Sri Lanka's #1 news source.
A very good evening and welcome to Biz 24, where we bring you innovations that are a cut above the rest and we talk about the state of the business. Now, today we have a very sensitive topic that is related to the crisis as well. Now, when it comes to economic crises and the household, there is a lot of factors that come into play, and especially when it comes to household appliances, especially things like refrigerators and other electronics, there is a lot that comes into play when it comes to the sustenance of our households. And when we're talking about things like refrigerators, of course, one of the key name brands that come into mind is Singer. And we know through the years, when we want to get appliances for our home, the first instance we think about is Singer. So with us today, we have two very notable guests to speak about this topic, about the crisis and how to manage through the crisis, especially when it comes to the buying of applications and of other things such as electronic goods for the household and the maintenance of the household. And to speak about that, we have with us the brand manager for Singer, who is Mr. Dinesh Sivagurunathan, and of course Mr. Wijitha Perera, who is a chartered engineer. Mr. Perera is a very distinguished individual when it comes to his field. He's a specialist in air conditioners and refrigerators, and he's been an expert in the field of construction for about 50 years now, with 50 years of experience. So we have a very notable individual. And of course, thank you very much to both of you for taking the time to speak to us today on Biz 24. Now, before we get into any specific questions, Mr. Perera, I'd like to direct this question to you. Now, we talk a lot about the economic crisis. We say, the crisis has impacted this and that. But what exactly is this economic crisis? So if you could just get us this energy crisis, if you could get us into the understanding of what the energy crisis means for us.
Yes, the energy crisis is actually becomes a crisis if the supply of the energy is not adequate to meet the demand. Then we go into a crisis. Talking of the energy crisis, that we have seen it happen in two ways. One is the shortage of the energy supply, which literally is power cuts, as we know. Second thing is the increase in the tariff, cost of the energy going up. So we have in the recent past witnessed both these. We have seen the increase in the tariff. We have also seen the interruption to the normal power supply, which we call power cuts or power outages. So both these will impact the consumer or the householder, because either way it's the householder who gets affected.
Of course, it trickles right down to our basic unit of family and the sustenance of the house. And actually, I would like to ask you, Mr. Perera, to just harp on this fact. How drastically does this affect an individual household?
Yes. First of all, it will affect your normal day-to-day lifestyle one is used to, because we are so dependent on energy, electricity for that. To be more precise, the day you don't have electricity, then you have to reprogram your lifestyle, which is not easy. Then if it is prolonged, it will have an impact on various other things. Say, for example, one of the major electrical piece of equipment which is used 24 hours of the day in a house is the refrigerator. Now, the refrigerator is used for a number of different purposes. One is to store our food, particularly the perishable foods. Also to keep our cooked food available for a longer period, because nowadays people are all very busy and finding domestic aid or helpers is very difficult. So you have to have some other alternative methods of saving time. So storage of cooked food is also a very important aspect in our day-to-day lives using a refrigerator.
Of course.
So when there's a power failure, there is a big tendency that it may impact, depending on the duration for which the power cut is or the power failure is, it may impact the quality of the food and the products which we have stored in our refrigerator. The refrigerator has two different components. In the good old days, we only had one refrigerator and one chamber, and we had a very small section right up for frozen items, fish or meat basically. Today we are seeing more and more of two-door refrigerators where the freezer section is having a separate door and you access it only when you want to access the frozen foods, and the chiller section, as we call it, or which is at a lower temperature, or rather higher temperature if I may say so, is a larger area where most of the items which are consumed or used regularly is kept or stored. Now if there is a power failure or power outage, the impact on these two sections will be very different. The freezer section, if you take it, has certain temperatures what one has to maintain. If you are storing fish and meats for long storage, maybe a couple of days to a week or so, it is imperative that we have to store it at minus 18 degrees Celsius. That's absolutely important. Otherwise, the quality of the product cannot be ensured. It can go bad. So, if there is no power supply, the fridge is literally switched off. But there is a certain inherent thermal storage within these two compartments which will see you through for some time. The time will vary depending on how good the refrigerator is, how good the insulation is, and how much products are inside that freezer chamber, what we call the thermal mass. If it is very small, the temperature will go up very fast. But if it is a large volume, for the same increase in the temperature, it will take a much longer time. Right? So there are a number of factors which come into the equation. So we got to consider all these things when we look for solutions. If there's no power, there's no power. There's nothing you can do it. But if we know in advance that there's going to be a power cut, there are some things what we can do. Talking of the freezer chamber, we can increase the thermal mass. I don't mean to say that you stuff the freezer chamber with all your perishable foods. No, that's not what I mean. You could have some ice storage built in. You can buy ice slabs, or what we call is ice banks or ice blocks, which can be kept inside the freezer chamber, which will convert to ice and create a thermal mass. If the ice mass becomes water or changes phase, it's not going to damage anything. But on the other hand, that may help to prevent the food from thawing and dropping the temperatures drastically. So that's one way of doing it. The second most important thing is what any one of us can do. Never open the door of the refrigerator during a power cut. Because if you keep it closed, the losses, thermal losses are greatly reduced. But if you even open the door once, it really impacts the thermal loss. So that's something what we can do.
Of course, there is a drastic loss, and there are things that we can do to combat it. But ideally, it would feel as if the very component, the refrigerator in itself, plays a key role in how your perishables are going to be stored, and of course, the future of your food, and overall how it's going to sustain itself over an outage. So I think I'd like to direct this question to Mr. Dinesh. Now, when we're considering buying a refrigerator, what are the most critical factors that we need to consider as a household when it comes to the purchasing of such refrigerators?
Yes, Anuradhi, I think it's a very relevant and practical question. There are so many things you should consider when you're buying a refrigerator, but what I thought was maybe I will point out a few points which are very, very important, so which is going to be useful if you are buying a refrigerator. One would be the amount of energy consumption, the number of people who are in a household, and then what's the consumption on an average on a daily basis. Because there are so many products out in the market, so you should be able to identify your requirement and you should be able to understand what is important for you. So as I said, there might be products which are smaller in capacity and which are in high capacity. If you take a household, let's say if there is about 2 people living in a household, you might not be needing a refrigerator which is huge. In the same time, if there are about 5 or 6 people living in a house, you might not be needing a refrigerator which is only one door. So you need to be very specific in terms of your usage and your requirement in terms of a refrigerator. So that is one thing. Number 2, the amount of money you are willing to spend on a refrigerator. You should be having a budget when you are trying to purchase a product. So out in the market, there are refrigerators you can buy starting from 80,000 rupees all the way up to about 1.5 million, even 2 million. So you should be considerate on how much of money you are willing to spend on this product. So one might say, my product is working fine. I've been using this refrigerator for the last 10, 15 years. It is fine. Why should I change it? The matter of the fact is, it might be working fine, but on the hindsight, it might be using a lot of electricity, which is going to hit you hard on your electricity bill. So it is important that you understand how good your refrigerator is in terms of its operation. So that is 2. And number 3 is the cost-benefit analysis. So if you are spending some money now, what is the benefit you are going to derive over the period of time? So I will try and explain it through a very simple example. Let's say your household consumes about 100 units of electricity for a month. So in current terms, that is about 6,000 rupees worth of value. So if you are having a refrigerator which is more than 10 years old, chances are it might be consuming almost half of the electricity, the total electricity bill of your house. So I'm talking about roughly about 50 units. If you're talking 100 units in total for the household, it's about 50 units. And in terms of rupee value, if your 100 unit bill is about 6,000, it's about 3,000, half of it. So if you are to change to a newer refrigerator which has the R600A refrigerant, you probably might be able to save about 1,500 rupees for a month. So if you accumulate it for a year, that is about 18,000 rupees. And if you're using that particular refrigerator over the next 5 years, you'll be almost saving close to about 100,000 rupees. So these are some of the points. There are so many other factors we should be considering, but these are some of the key points you should keep in mind when you're buying a refrigerator.
There is a lot to look out for as well, especially during the energy and economic crisis. A household, to stay afloat, there is a lot that has to be done and a lot of consideration that has to be going into the purchase of anything really, and especially electronic appliances like refrigerators. Well, there is a lot for us to discuss, but let's go in for a very short commercial break. You're watching Biz 24. Stay with us.
Hire purchase scheme. So you can make a payment plan and buy a refrigerator, and you can pay your installments up to about 2 years. So that is 24 months. These are some of the schemes which are currently available if you are interested in buying a refrigerator.
So there is a lot of alternatives even in the economic crisis. We can hope to have a better fitting appliance. For our home, and also when it comes to the idea of getting an appropriate refrigerator. Now there has been a lot of talk when it comes to refrigerators specifically, I feel, and I'd like to direct this question to Mr. Wijitha. Now, myths and issues, maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe it happens in other countries as well, but specifically in Sri Lanka, we have seen the boom of certain sayings where, if you turn off the refrigerator in the evenings, it's going to save power, and you can turn it back on in the morning, and that is a way of efficiency for households. It is quite the prevalent practice still up to this date. So if you could just let us know about other myths and how we can combat them, what do you have to say about that, Mr. Wijitha?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, because this is, if I may say so, practiced quite extensively by householders. Argument is that we are switching it for 5 hours, therefore obviously we are going to save electricity consumption. Pardon me. But one must really understand what happens if you switch off a refrigerator. When you switch off a refrigerator, the temperature what you are maintaining inside, which is less than the outdoor, will start gradually going up, because there is a heat transfer from the warm outside to the cold inside. Now that will gradually keep on increasing the temperature of the chill chamber as well as in the freezer chamber. Now the freezer chamber, that's why I said, if you have a thermal mass by way of even ice packs, in addition to the food, the rate at which the temperature rises can be controlled. But you can't do that inside the chill chamber. It will start rising. So what people do is keep it switched off during late night, say 10 o'clock in the night till about 6 o'clock in the morning, and say, right, we are saving energy. But you must understand what really happens. Now, those days it was a flat tariff. In most of the domestic users had a flat tariff. That is 24 hours of the day, you had only one tariff. But now they have gone into a 3-tier tariff. Peak, off-peak and day, even for domestic users. The off-peak is the time we are talking of switching the refrigerator off. That is 10 to 6 or somewhere thereof. And that is the lowest tariff. So you switch off the fridge when it is cheapest. And then when you switch it back on, you have to bring it back to the design temperature, which means you are going to consume energy outside the cheapest band to go back to where you were. So that really is not giving you any benefit. In addition to your risking of the affecting of the products which are stored. If at all that somebody wants to switch off the refrigerator and save money, the best time to do is on the peak time. That is 6:30 to 10 or whatever. Times vary from area to area. But that again one must decide, because even though you switch it off, sooner or later you will have to bring it back into the temperature what it was. You consume more or less the same amount of energy afterwards. So that is not an option as far as I'm concerned. Even though people may disagree with me, that's debatable. We can discuss that in a different forum.
Exactly. And there is, that myth is very prevalent as well. But I feel like, personally, if there was a better energy consumption on the refrigerator, there wouldn't have any need to turn off the refrigerator at any point. And that's, I guess, that is where Singer comes in with their premium line of products. Now, we do have a time constraint. So, Mr. Dinesh, I'd like to ask you before we conclude on this topic. Now, at Singer, what are the measures that have been taken now when it comes to tackling this energy crisis? What are the measures that Singer has taken for the consumers?
Well, we have been working with certain government institutions as of late. You probably might get to hear more about it in the near future. If I am to mention one particular area which we are interested in currently, we are working with the Sustainable Energy Authority. So our aim is to somehow try and get rid of inefficient old refrigerators from the energy grid. So we are talking about, let's say, about 500,000 refrigerators over the next 5 years. So doing so, the saving would be roughly about 500 gigawatt hours, which is huge, mind you. But this is not something simple, and this is not possible only by us. So we will be needing support from government institutions like the Sustainable Energy Authority, other private organizations who are there in the market, and also the general public. General public also plays a pivotal role because we will have to work together as a team for us to make this a success and take this project forward.
So there is a lot that has been done by Singer, but there's still a long way to go, and there is a future for anyone that wants to have their own refrigerator that is efficient and up to the times and standard for their household, so that they can save as much as possible, especially in times of crisis. So it's great to see an effort done by Singer for combating the energy crisis and the economic crisis, so that households do not suffer egregious losses. But that is all the time we have for you today. Thank you very much both to Mr. Wijitha and also Mr. Dinesh for taking the time to speak to our audience regarding this crisis and this important topic. Well, that's all the time we have for you tonight. Join us again next time on Biz 24. I'm Anuradhi Wickramasinghe. Thank you for watching. Have a great night. Welcome back to Biz 24. We were in conversation with brand manager for Singer, Dinesh Sivagurunathan, and Mr. Wijitha Perera, chartered engineer. Now, we just had a very insightful first segment regarding how the energy crisis has affected households on a very basic level and what can be done when purchasing very key electronic appliances like refrigerators for our households, and how we can determine what is ideal for us. Now, Mr. Wijitha, before we went into the break, you spoke a little bit briefly about what can be done by the consumer. If you could elaborate a little bit about what are the options there are for the consumer in order to combat this energy crisis and in order to ride this wave.
Yeah. As we know, if you take the electricity bill of a domestic residence, say approximately 50% of the electricity consumption is through the refrigerator. So that's a big chunk. Anything what we can save in that is going to be an appreciable saving. So that must be understood first of all. But it does not mean to say that we can switch off the refrigerator for energy conservation. No. Conservation is not at the expense of quality. That must also be clearly understood. But there are lots of things what we can do to ensure that we effectively use the refrigerator and optimize the energy consumption. Just to briefly understand what happens inside the refrigerator, most of us will think that it cools the product you put in. It does something more. It takes the moisture also out, because you can't prevent that from happening due to thermodynamic properties. When it cools, it will also take some moisture out. So when you take the moisture out, that is the moisture which goes and deposits on the freezer chamber. In the good old days, we had to defrost it manually. There's a chunk of ice forming around the deep freezer. Now that moisture is not coming from anywhere. It's coming from what is inside the refrigerator, and also the air which goes into the refrigerator every time we open the door. And that costs us money to form the ice, and then to dissolve it also it costs us energy, and it goes down to the waste. So we must try and minimize how or what happens there. Couple of things can be done. Of course, I keep repeating, opening of the refrigerator door must be minimized. Our households, we are quite used to it. In fact, I'm guilty of it. I'm sure you are. When we want something, we go and first thing we open the door. Then look inside and say, what do I need? If you're cooking, you open the refrigerator door and think, what vegetable do I need to take out for the dinner? All that time the refrigerator door is open. That means moisture-laden warm air is going into the refrigerator, which is very bad. What we should do is pre-plan. We know what we need. And when we are stocking stuff inside the refrigerator also, stock them in an orderly manner so that you know exactly what is where. It does not take a lot of time for you to take out the item that you need. Organize it. That's one way of doing it. Second thing is, particularly prepared or cooked food, if you store inside, you must put them in wherever practically possible, put them in an airtight container. Why do I insist on an airtight container? Because all our foods like gravies, curries and even rice has moisture in it. If we keep it in an open vessel, the moisture in this product is automatically extracted. That is why if you keep some item uncovered in the fridge for 2 days, and when you take it out, if it was a curry, it would be half the volume. And then you have to add water and reheat it before you can use it. That is because the entire process within the refrigerator extracts the moisture. So it's very important that you put it in an airtight container so that the moisture of the food does not go out. That not only helps in the energy conservation, also it helps in retaining the quality of the food what you are trying to keep inside the refrigerator. That's one thing. There's another very simple exercise what even anybody in the household can do, because we are talking of outside air going into the refrigerator. Now we keep the door closed, and once it is closed, we presume that it is closed. But if you take a A4 sheet, any rough paper, and keep it on the body and close the door, and then see if you can move that paper along the edge of the door. I'm sure most of the time, if it is an old refrigerator, you will be able to do that. That should send a warning signal to you, which means the gasket is not sealing properly. If a paper can move around, air can go in. So then you must get a technician to come and replace the gasket so that you don't have that leakage. That is an appreciable thing. Second thing is, of course, keeping everything in a organized manner inside, keeping it closed with an airtight lid. Then even inside the freezer chamber, stack the food in an orderly manner where you don't spend a lot of time deciding or trying to extract what you need out of a large stack of products. So that's one way of ensuring that the time you spend keeping the door open is minimized.
So there is a lot that we can do with our already existing refrigerators. But there was a mention regarding how if there are issues with gaskets and other things. We mentioned before we went into the break about the entire idea of your refrigerator not being appropriate for your household. Now, when we're talking about things like that, we're going to have to eventually make the decision to purchase a separate refrigerator, a new refrigerator. So when it comes to things like that, now the energy crisis is happening, and on top of that, the economic crisis is already in full blow. So if you could, Mr. Dinesh, let us know over your services. Now, how are the financial aspects handled at your company, at Singer? Are there financial concessions that makes it easier for someone to purchase a product, to purchase a refrigerator that is better fitting for their household?
Yeah, Anuradha, as you said, we are in the middle of an economic crisis. That's a given. Everyone knows it. So what we try to do as an organization is try and make it comfortable to the consumer if he's trying to purchase a product, especially a refrigerator. So we have certain measures in terms of how we can accommodate a consumer buying a refrigerator. One would be a cash discount. So if, say, somebody wants to buy a refrigerator, the obvious choice would be for him to go to a showroom. He can choose the product what he wants to buy, and then we will be giving him a discount, a cash discount, so he can purchase the product. The second option would be a trade-in offer. What I call a trade-in offer is, let's say you have a refrigerator at home which is old and which is inefficient in your eyes. So you can trade that product with us, you can give that product to us and get a discount on that particular product. So we will give you a concession on the product what we collect from you, and then you can choose whatever the model you prefer and then make the purchase. So that is one other option. Then third, if you have a credit card, I'm sure most of us probably are having credit cards. So if you have a credit card with you, you can have an option of going to a purchase, let's say up to about 60 months on installment, on interest-free schemes, on any other credit cards what you have. Of course, the offers may vary time to time, but then you have an option of going up to about 60 months interest-free on a credit card. So one might say that, okay, I don't have a credit card, I don't have a way of buying it for cash, and I don't have an old fridge to replace. What would I do? Do I still stand a chance to buy a refrigerator? My answer would be yes, you still stand a chance to buy a refrigerator. What you've got to do is you probably can visit one of our showrooms, one of the Singer showrooms which is close by, and then you can always opt for something called